And welcome to our Wednesday morning edition of Top Story. On our morning show, Tim and I call Wednesdays Wellness Wednesdays because we think it's important to halfway through the week to sort of lift you up and give you some inspiration to keep going for the rest of the week. With that in mind, with the fact that this is Wellness Wednesday on TV, we are very happy to be talking about this in particular today, the Algoma Community Health Profile. And we're talking live in our studios this morning with Dr. Jennifer Loo. Dr. Loo, how are you this morning?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. First of all, you look way too young to have written this.
Oh, thank you.
I'm thinking, my gosh, what are you, 4?
Appearances can be deceiving, but I will pass on the compliments to the team as well.
Oh, that's awesome. How big is the team?
Well, the entire team at Algoma Public Health is certainly all of us, plus our partners, because public health is not a solo sport. It takes the organized efforts of everyone in our community to really make us healthier. In terms of the folks who are really active involved in this report, we're talking about our epidemiologist, Jordan Robson, our research policy analyst, Hillary Cutler, and myself. We did really the brunt of the work in terms of compiling the data, analyzing it, and presenting it in this format so that it's nice and easy to understand. And then, of course, we have our communications team and the rest of our foundations and strategic support team who really worked with us to get it ready for dissemination.
And I have to say, when I was going through it before we started chatting, I'm very thankful that you made it, as simple and concise as possible, because it's so easy to understand. It's not full of stats. I mean, the stats are there, but it's not just about the numbers.
Yeah, and for us, that was really important because whenever we put out a report to the public, the goal really is for everyone to understand the message, right? And so, we were spending a lot of time trying to say, well, what's really important for the people to understand? Data is important. We have to base our actions on the facts, and really important, everyone has to understand them too.
Now tell me about this particular study and profile. Is it an annual one? I noticed that this one's dated this past September. Do you do one every year?
Sure. So we think of this as like a checkup. So when you see your family physician or your nurse practitioner, you typically once in a while get a full checkup just to see how things are. And this is the same thing. So as a public health doctor, the community is my patient, and this community health profile is like a checkup for the community.
What a high maintenance patient.
So unfortunately, we can't do it as often as once a year simply because the data is not available and updated on that frequent a basis. If you look at the back of the profile for people who are really into the nuts and bolts of the data, we actually list all of our sources of data. So these are things like the Canadian Census, for example. These are things like community health surveys, their hospitalization data, and every data source is updated sometimes, monthly, but sometimes only once a year or even longer. So we try and put out a population health assessment or a checkup like this once every several years, maybe 5 years or so, just so that we know what's going on in our community and what the priorities are.
And this report encompasses the City of Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma?
Correct. So Ontario has 35 public health units that are responsible for delivering public health services. So these are the care teams for the communities. There's 35 of them. And we work with local partners to address local health needs. We work upstream. We take a preventive approach. And these are the public health nurses that you see, seeing your new moms with their newborns, helping them with breastfeeding. These are our public health inspectors who make sure that our pools and spas and restaurants are inspected and safe. As a public health unit, we have a mandate to once in a while do this kind of checkup. And this is part of the work that we do.
Now, what would you say, if you had to pick one thing, we're going to talk about a couple of different issues that are particular to us, but if you had to, while you were compiling this, just zero in on one surprise, perhaps, what would it be?
Wow, that's really hard to talk about because, again, when we do a checkup, it's for the entire community. And the things that are important for, our pregnant moms and young people are sometimes different than the things that are important for our older men and women. But I think one thing that applies to everyone that is really striking is that 3 out of 4 preventable 3 out of 4 premature deaths in Algoma are preventable.
That's something that struck home with me for some reason. It just amazed me. So talk about what some of the reasons are.
Sure. So when I say a premature death, it means that someone has died before the age of 75. So if you look at the life expectancy in the report, a man nowadays lives to 76 years in Algoma and a woman to 82 years. That's really amazing. We've gained a lot of years over the past decades. We're not nearly as high as Ontario overall, where in Ontario a man lives to 80 and a woman lives to 84. So when I talk about a premature death, it means that, hey, these are the deaths where people actually didn't get to live to that expected lifespan. And when we look deeper into these causes of death, we find that a lot of them are linked to things like eating healthy, things like being active, really important things like commercial tobacco smoking. What was really striking is that in Algoma we found that 30% of us are still smokers, and that's almost double the smoking rate compared to Ontario. And not surprisingly, we see that death rates, for example, due to lung cancer are higher in Algoma as well.
Now, do you think industrial plants would affect that number as well? Because in Northern Ontario, for instance, we have the steel plant and we had a pulp and paper mill. In Sudbury it's mining, in Espanola it's pulp and paper. Do you think there's a relationship between the premature deaths and industry?
So absolutely, when we look at a big population, there are many, many things that contribute to why we have a higher number of deaths. I would certainly say that by far and large, the biggest contributor would be the tobacco smoke. Yes, there may be some contributing factor too with regards to environmental exposures or occupational exposures when people are more exposed because of the types of work that they do. But if we look at what so many people are exposed to on a day-to-day basis, particularly if they personally smoke, that is really the most important factor.
Now, when you were taking a look at this particular subject, smoking tobacco, you must have wondered why is it so high in Northern Ontario and why is it so high in Algoma?
Yeah, and I think that is something that we're continue to dig into as well. Again, things in public health are never simple. There's multiple causes. And for something like tobacco smoke, we look at things right from the beginning, like when our kids are not even old enough, for example, to purchase tobacco. But what we find, again, reported in the data is that our kids have tried cigarettes at a higher rate than kids in Ontario overall. And a lot of times the way that they're getting them may be from older kids or young adults or their friends or families. And one of the things that we urge is that, hey, let's be role models, especially for our youth, because we want to set them on a path that is healthy. They're at such an interesting time in their young lives, trying a lot of different things. And that's a period of time that's really key, because if they start on a healthy road, that can lead them onto a path that has a greater number of life years.
And I think with kids, obviously, they don't realize how addictive it becomes.
It's correct, yeah. And nicotine is very addictive, and it's very, very difficult to quit smoking. It's such a challenge. When I used to practice family medicine and also addiction medicine, it would be such a challenge, and the people who are successful at quitting do it after a lot of hard work. So the other message that we have is to really support one another. We all have individual health challenges, whether it's quitting smoking or staying at a healthy weight. So I think let's be supportive of one another and not minimize these challenges, so that we support each other in taking on these health challenges. And also, as a community, let's think about creating supportive environments so that, when we're spending our time in workspaces or in public parks, let's make sure those spaces are smoke-free so that we're not triggered to smoke if we previously have, and that our kids can enjoy environments that are smoke-free.
There's so many different segments that you covered. Smoking, of course, is a big one. Vaccine preventable diseases. Some good news there for Algoma.
Absolutely. So our kids are doing really, really well when it comes to vaccine preventable diseases. It means that the vast majority of our kids are up to date with their immunizations by the time they hit school. And actually, they're doing better than their Ontario counterparts. And really, this is a huge pat on the back for our parents because they're the reason that our kids are doing so well.
That's awesome. And there are things like hepatitis C and how rampant or not it is here in the Algoma region. Healthy eating, active living, cutting down on alcohol, those are all things. Are they, those three especially, just geared to Algoma, or is that a general piece of advice that you would offer throughout the province?
Sure. So I would say that the first issue you mentioned, hepatitis C, is particularly important for Algoma. Our rates of hepatitis C are higher than what is seen in Ontario. And for hepatitis C, it really need not be so. It's preventable. So for folks who use needles, we say never share needles and always use clean, sterile needles. That way you will never get a transmission of hepatitis C because it's a blood-borne infection. And then we know that there are groups of people who are at higher risk of hepatitis C. So if folks have received a blood product or a blood transfusion before 1992, they should get tested at least once for hepatitis C because there is a small risk if they had a blood transfusion way back. And then the other thing is if ever someone has used injection drugs, even once in their lifetime, they should get tested too.
Better safe than sorry.
Absolutely. And again, we have a publicly funded healthcare system. It costs us nothing to just go see our doctor or our nurse practitioner and be able to get tested. And finally, the great news about Hep C is that there is a cure now. There are new medications that are available. They're covered by the Ontario Drug Benefit. And so, you know, if folks were tested way back when and know they have it but haven't done anything about it, we say, hey, now is the time to go talk to your healthcare provider because there are treatment options available and it can be cured.
Terrific. There's so much awesome information in this booklet. Now, is this available to the public? And if so, how can we get our hands on our copy?
Sure. So copies are absolutely available to everyone. You can go to our website, algomapublichealth.com, and there's a digital copy there.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's fully there. And if folks have any questions, there's also a contact at the back and an email address that they can reach us at.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Dr. Jennifer Loo. Certainly appreciate the information.
Thank you so much.
And keep up the good work.
Thanks.
I love that you're keeping an eye on all of us.
Okay, will do.
Thanks, Doctor. And we'll be back with more Top Story right after this.